Hey everybody, this is Scott Jaycox from Covestic. Welcome to our webinar, Tips for Cracking the CMDB Code. Agenda. So we'll start with the promise of CMDB. We'll go into false starts, and by that we mean just some of the common challenges that we see customers encounter with configuration management in the CMDB. Talk about solutions. Above and beyond, so in other words, basically other uses and other utility to be gleaned from the CMDB beyond the obvious core IT service management applications and capabilities. And then next steps. Okay, so my name is Scott Jaycox. I am the director of our ServiceNow practice here at Covestic. On the webinar today, we also have James Devine. He is one of our senior solutions architects. We also have Shiv Vichare. So he's from QuickNexus. I won't steal Shiv's thunder, but real quick, QuickNexus is a partner of Covestic's and ServiceNow's. And Shiv and his team focus their services and solutions exclusively on the ServiceNow CMDB. All right, quick overview of Covestic. So Covestic has been in the service management business ever since we were founded in 2001. We have over 200 employees, over 100 successful ServiceNow projects. We successfully maintain a customer satisfaction rating north of 9. And our repeat business number, so basically the number of follow-on projects is over 90%. And Shiv, I'll let you introduce QuickNexus.
Thank you, Scott. QuickNexus was founded in 2016. And as Scott mentioned, we focus exclusively on the CMDB and ServiceNow. And since 2016, we've done more than 90 CMDB projects, more than half of which have been discovery implementations. And we are a bronze technology partner. And we do have a featured product, Discovery Admin, on the ServiceNow store that automates the configuration, maintenance, and troubleshooting of ServiceNow discovery and service mapping 100x faster than an experienced ServiceNow discovery administrator. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about the technical aspects of this in part 2 of the webinar, but right now, Scott, over to you, and let's get this started.
All right, thanks, Shiv. And James, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Hello, everyone. This is James Devine. I'm a solutions architect with Covestic. I've been implementing ServiceNow projects with CMDB for over 8 years now, and I am very lucky to have had several of my projects be successful enough that the clients presented their success stories at Knowledge at the annual ServiceNow Knowledge Conference. I think that's a big testimony to the fact that CMDB can be done and it can be done right. We've been hearing about the promise of CMDB for years that simply having one will be the magic bullet to solving all of your service management woes. And maybe it's been a little oversold, and maybe the effort to get there has been a little undersold. But we do want to talk today about why you want it, and then the right way to go about getting it. So let's talk first about what CMDB is for those that are not service management gurus around here. The CMDB is a digital representation of your infrastructure and your environment that supports your business services. So if you are offering, as you see in the picture here, SAP Enterprise Services, and you have the individual elements of SAP underneath that as something that you as an IT organization offer to the rest of the business, the CMDB is what gives you all of the supporting elements of that and the relationships between them. So that is in a very Reader's Digest format what a CMDB is. And when you have that, you certainly do get improved functionality when it comes to the core IT service management areas, such as change management, specifically where you're able then to very easily determine the impact and the risk of a change to a CI into the supporting infrastructure and what impact it's going to have on your ability to deliver your business services. You can also do very targeted communications based off of who's going to be impacted with the relationships all the way upstream or downstream to the change of any CI. There's also routing and reporting benefits that come with it, as well as greatly improving the maturity of the other IT service management core processes. And we'll talk towards the end of the session today about some of the areas beyond core ITSM that CMDB really is a game changer in the service management space. But let's talk about the reality is that quite often when people start out to come up with their CMDB, they start with a very tech-heavy focus on bringing data in and getting all the CI asset data in there that they possibly can. And they're usually bringing this in from Altiris or SolarWinds or OpsView or some other tool, and they are able then to flood the CMDB with data. In fact, I'm working with a client right now that has 71 classes of CIs that they're ready to bring in on a first phase of their CMDB. While it's great that we have all of that data, it's not necessarily doing us any good if we don't actually have the relationships between them and we don't have the business services defined. So, we are big proponents of not trying to boil the ocean, as the adage goes. We want to make sure that we start very slowly and build our way into a successful process around your CMDB. So that means not focusing on the technology, not looking at what we can bring in from our external tools, but starting very specifically with our business services and working our way down from there, mastering each step of the process as we go before we take on more and more information, so we don't get that unmanaged cluster of CI data that doesn't really provide the business with any value. All right, now it's time to do a little demo. So I'm going to switch over here to my ServiceNow development instance, and we see that I have just a clean instance, very few modifications. I'm going to go ahead and just come into my business service list. So these are all the defined business services that the IT organization offers to the rest of the business. We see that we have the highest level here, IT services. We have quite a few that are part of the demo data. I'm going to pick on PeopleSoft CRM. So if this is one of our business services that we offer, then we maintain a CI record, a configuration item for this particular CI, for this business service, called PeopleSoft CRM, and we maintain attributes such as owned by, business criticality, if this is production, development, test, or if this is disaster recovery, the current status of it. Over here we have what SLAs are tied to it, so that helps us with our change analysis. If the change advisory board is considering whether or not the impact of a proposed change will violate the SLAs, that is a good reason for them to not approve that particular CAB for that particular time. Then we also have down here the relationships. So we have a tree view here of all the relationships that exist for this particular business service. So this tying them to the underlying infrastructure that actually supports this. So we go from the logical layer here to a more of a technical layer. We actually get down to the application layer, then servers underneath that. So that's one way to see the relationships, but if we actually wanted to see them the best way possible, we come over here and click the icon for the business service map, and that's going to bring us up a visual indication of the CI itself, which we see PeopleSoft CRM is right here, and then we have all of the other CIs that we have a record for that have relationship back to that CI for whatever its purpose is. So we see that this particular business service depends on this Apache server here for it to be able to run. So what we have in a CMDB is a record of all of the CIs that are in our infrastructure and, very importantly, the relationships that connect them to each other. So without those relationships, you don't really have a true CMDB. You can have a collection of CIs, and it's more of an asset tracking effort than it is a true business CMDB effort. So having these relationships here is the most important part of your CMDB effort. So that's really important when you start thinking about how you're going to approach developing your CMDB, is that yes, you can get lots of CI data from other tools such as SCCM and Altiris and SolarWinds and BigFix and what have you, but can you also get the relationships between them? And in some cases, yes, you can. Sometimes it is difficult to bring those in, but if you don't have those relationships and all you have are CI records, then you're really not getting the value out of a CMDB. So just a quick couple of features here. So I am looking at the business service map centered on PeopleSoft CRM. If I wanted to see this on one of these additional servers, let's come over here to this particular load balancer, and I'm just going to do a right click and say view map. So that's going to redraw it from there, and it's going to show us everything that's relying on that particular server. So that's where we really start to see the value of CMDB, is having that automatic representation of what the interconnectedness is between all of our configuration items. If we don't have this, we are relying on tribal knowledge, such as Bob in the far corner, to know what are we using that particular SQL server for, and hopefully he's accurate, and hopefully he's going to be here tomorrow. Otherwise, we need to have a CMDB that can tell us that, one that we can trust, and one we can keep up to date. So that's just a quick look at the CMDB with some out-of-box demo data in ServiceNow.
Now, with that being said, I would love to jump into the second part of our discussion today, which is around why CMDBs fail and what can we do about it, right? So we'll get into all of these circles that you're seeing on my screen right now. But let me start with the problems, right? Now, there is many reasons why CMDBs fail. But to help us get our heads around it, we've broken them down into 5 different categories. And as a part of the discussion today, if any of these categories resonate with you, if that's something that you're facing within your organization, just send it out in the chat window, because it's going to help us understand where you guys are coming from. It's going to help us help you, right? So the top 5 categories, or the top categories that we have in terms of the reason why CMDBs fail, is maintenance, isolation, tactical, process, and leadership. And I'm going to get into each of these so that we're well aligned with what exactly they mean. So let me start with maintenance, right? Now, I'm going to call this the M word. I'm going to use maintenance over the next 10, 15, at least about 50 times. And if there's anything you take away today, it is the word maintenance, right? When you do a CMDB, it's always about the maintenance. And very often people start with the CMDB, but they don't realize that it is an ongoing effort. It never is over when it comes to the CMDB. And as irony may have it, the rubber hits the road after the CMDB implementation and double quotes project is complete. And what we mean by that is usually when we're working with a CMDB, we're like, yeah, we'll let us get started, and it's a 3-month effort, or likewise. Well, that could be the initiation, but operationally within the organization, it is something that we expect and we want our customers to continue on an ongoing basis, right? So that's really the maintenance that we're talking about. The second is isolation. So an isolated CMDB is built without the consideration of how the CMDB will be used and which processes will be using the CMDB. And as a result of that, an isolated CMDB rapidly diminishes in value, as there's no reason to maintain and enhance the quality of the data in the CMDB. So you may have the best CMDB, you may have the best data, you may even have the best design, but if there is nobody using it, if there is no process looking at it, referencing it, it's pointless, right? And it is a very, very fundamental factor why, even though you may start off really strong and maybe have even a successful go live, in a matter of a few weeks, in a matter of a few months, the value is significantly diminishes because it was created, designed, and built in isolation. The third is tactical. Now, when we look at tactical, a tactical approach to the CMDB results in centralized silos of data. Now, this is, of course, tongue-in-cheek, but we hear so often, you know what, we have data silos across the different organizations, we need to centralize them. But guess what, if you take a tactical approach, you're just going to have all that junk that was spread out all in one place. Now, it's definitely better to have it in one place, but that doesn't mean you have a successful CMDB. So a CMDB built to tactically solve a specific problem often undermines the strategic sustainability of the CMDB. And we're kind of going back to that theme of maintenance, right? Tactical decisions that may seem appropriate at that time often end up costing more in the future. And of course, we have suboptimal outcomes. So what we do not want at all in a CMDB is just different tables in ServiceNow representing different spreadsheets with the teams tactically using them for what they need. Now, yes, it's better than having them in spreadsheets, but if you really want a great CMDB, this tactical approach is not going to get you very far. I'll move on to a couple of the other things. The process, right? Now, a successful CMDB implementation isn't just about the data, okay? And what we mean by that is just like incidents are managed via incident management, right? We all know that changes are managed via change management. The CMDB is managed via the configuration management process. And any CMDB implementation that doesn't incorporate the process to govern the CMDB results in failure. So think about it this way. If I said, you know what, let's do incidents, but we don't have an incident management process, you kind of look at me funny, right? But we've seen so many times that people talk about CMDB, but they don't think about completely the configuration management process. And it is the similarity is just like doing incidents without incident management. So as a part of the CMDB strategy, a lack of process, a lack of thinking about how the process will wrap around the CMDB is a very, very underpinning reason of why a CMDB would fail. And finally, let's blame our bosses, right? I mean, this is about leadership, but it's more than that, and here's why, right? The data stored in the CMDB is maintained by numerous teams within IT and across the business. So the maintenance requires resources to take ownership of the data they own, right? Whoever's close to the data has to take the accountability for that data. And we call that a delegated administration or a delegated CMDB, but that's really what makes it successful. And the lack of leadership support implies the inability of these resources who are closest to the data, who know the data, who are supposed to maintain the data, the M word again, to dedicate the time and effort to effectively maintain their portion of the CMDB. And think of it this way, if you're tasked to work with the CMDB, and if that CMDB effort is not in the conversation, in the mind space of the person you report to, it's a good chance the CMDB is going to fail. And that iteration goes on and on. So if the person, your boss's boss, isn't thinking about the CMDB, that's another very underpinning factor of why the CMDB would fail. So we want to make sure that we have the leadership, we have the buy-in all the way. And if you don't, that's definitely something that's going to hinder you. So again, of these 5 things, we would love to know what are the ones that hit close to home for you guys. If you could just put it in the chat, and that will really help us, help you in the overall conversation, right? But there's one thing before I move to the solutions and lessons that we've learned. I've not spoken about technology in the problem space, right? So luckily, we live in a space where the technology is the enabler. The technology is not the problem. We are ServiceNow customers, and it's a great product. It's a great platform, right? So the technology, the way we look at it, is the enabler, and of course, it's going to be a part of our conversation on the bottom right. And of course, we're going to talk more about it as a part of the part 2 of the webinar series. But really, in terms of where we are right now with the maturity of the products and the technology available to us, is the problems that we've discussed that we've seen cause our main reasons why CMDBs fail. And of course, with the problems that we have lessons learned. We have solutions and recommendations for how you can tackle each one of them. So we have, for the 5 problems, we have these 5 categories of solutions that I'm going to go over and help kind of drive the point in terms of what it takes to make sure you have a great CMDB. Now, before I go into the detail, it's again these 5 categories. So it's ongoing, data-driven, strategic, factum, and CIF. And I'm going to get into these details right now. So we started by saying the first problem was about maintenance, right? So yes, it is always about maintenance. But think of it this way. Any decision made with respect to the CMDB must always consider the total cost to maintain that solution. And what I really mean by that is very often we say, how easy it is to create an attribute and put it on create an attribute in ServiceNow and put it on the form, right? 5 minutes work, even with migration, maybe 15 minutes, half an hour, right? But think of it this way, that attribute, if it's on a CI class that has 10,000 CIs, and the person maintaining that attribute is busy doing something else and dedicates like 1% of his mind space to maintaining that attribute just doesn't make sense. It's going to hamper the overall perception and the quality of the CMDB. So we take the position that it's best not to initiate CMDB work, or at least the part of that work, right? If the ongoing maintenance isn't something that is scoped or budgeted for. So you have to think long-term. Any decision we make has to have the ongoing mindset, the total cost of ownership, fundamentally as a part of our decision, as a part of approving any changes that we made to the CMDB. The second is data-driven. So this, of course, is aligned with the isolation problem that we had, right? What we want to do is we want to have, the data-driven processes reference and leverage the CMDB, utilizing CIs and their attributes to enhance and automate the process. Now, the second part is very important. It's not just about referencing. So what, right? Of course, when you reference, it's great because you know what's happened to that CI, and it's definitely great visibility, and that's a win. But we want to take that one step further. We want to use the attributes. We want to use that data to further enhance and automate the process. Think approvals, think auto assignments, think SLAs, think reporting. So with that, what happens is it forces, right, This ensures that the CMDB is constantly in use, thereby prioritizing its maintenance, resulting in an accurate and reliable CMDB, of course. And what we mean by that is it does seem like a chicken and egg, right? We need great data, and then we're going to use the process. And we only if we have a process that references the data is actually going to scale and get better. But the way we look at it is we take a holistic approach. So we marry the process and the data. And we believe that way, when you have a data-driven process that depends heavily on the CMDB, it enforces, it prioritizes, it makes the CMDB accurate. And the process, of course, has significant benefits. Your justifications for investment in the CMDB, all of that then just becomes a natural outcome of a data-driven CMDB. Or sorry, a data-driven process, and of course, relying heavily on the CMDB. The next part, of course, we spoke about the tactical limitations, and we obviously want to have a strategic approach to the CMDB, right? So we just don't want to have centralized silos of data that really doesn't help anyone in the long term. So a strategic approach to the CMDB doesn't simply centralize the data. It goes deeper into understanding the data, who's using it and how it's being used. So it's not just about putting it together, but hey, if this data and this data, if this two pieces of data or two tables of data that are actually representing the same thing, it strategically makes so much more sense to have it in one place and have a delegated administration where the teams closest to that data, closest to those attributes are responsible for maintaining them. And of course, they can then leverage each other and of course have better data in the CMDB, right? And this approach results in higher upfront costs, but definitely reduces the total cost of ownership to, again, the M word, right? Maintain the CMDB. And this approach, yeah, sometimes it seems a little counterintuitive. Let's just get started. We need something to happen next week. Maybe it may help in the near term, but in the long term, definitely we want to have that strategic mindset to make sure that the CMDB is successful. Next point, right? We spoke about the process and the fact that it's not just about the data. A successful CMDB implementation isn't just about the data. The process, SACM, is the underpinning process to govern the CMDB. People call it configuration management. SACM is the idle term. But what SACM does is it goes beyond the data, right? It requires a configuration management plan. It incorporates people, design, operations, reports, and governance. So as you can see, if you just look at the CMDB with a data mindset, you're not talking about the people. You're not talking about any of these other things that are so fundamental to having a successful CMDB. And the message that we're giving here is that while a CMDB is a database, a configuration management database, for it to be successful, there is the process conversation, the approach, the people, and everything else that we need to make that successful. And if you do not do that, that is definitely something that would be holding you back from having a successful CMDB. Right. And finally, we spoke about the leadership, and we're actually calling out the CIO here, right? So as we mentioned before, the folks you report to have CMDB in their mind space and what they do on a day-to-day basis. And if you go on iterating that in IT, it rolls all the way up to the CIO, right? So the data stored in the CMDB is, of course, maintained by numerous teams within IT and, more importantly, across the business, right? So we need the leadership handshake. It could be the CEO with the CIO, the CSO. It could be other parts of the business or the business owners or the line of business owners. All of them have a stake in the CMDB. And getting this CIO support underpins the commitment for resources within IT and across the business to work together on an ongoing basis. And again, the ongoing underpins the maintenance aspect of it. And what this results in is it makes the CMDB an integral part of every process conversation, right? And that will make sure, or that will underpin your CMDB to be accurate and reliable, and of course, resulting in a successful CMDB. Now, if we again summarize what we've learned or what we believe a successful CMDB should entail, it's again the ongoing mentality, the data-driven approach, and strategic, SACM, and CIO. And again, if you look at our solutions, right, of course, there's technology, of course, there's ServiceNow, there's discovery, service mapping, you have all your integrations and great stuff that's going to help you get there. But without these non-technical, it's purely a functional, it's a process approach. These are the precursors that we have to embrace as a part of a successful CMDB implementation. Now, as a part of what we're going to do with part 2 of the webinar series, we're going to focus heavily on the technology, and we're going to talk about a few other things. But I do want to share a few things at a very high level. These are things that we would do when we work with customers, but independent of that, we urge customers to do these things within their organizations so that they can be successful in their CMDB endeavors, right? First and foremost, right? Look at what we're saying. Let's disagree to agree, and this is obviously tongue-in-cheek. But what we're saying is that within an organization, people come from different backgrounds, they have different experiences, and thus they have different meanings for the same words, right? When somebody says CI, when somebody says assets, SACM, configuration management, everybody comes in with different definitions, and when you talk these acronyms as a part of your CMDB initiative, people interpret those as different things. And as a part of any initiative, it's extremely important to align on the key definitions. As a part of that initiative, you will come across confusing terminology, right? Is asset, how do we really define an asset? Is it asset management? Is it just another CI? Or what does it really mean? So let's clarify those confusing terminologies that are out there in the industry and obviously specific to your organization. And let's make sure everybody is aligned on the key concepts. And this alignment is a precursor to any initiative you do, but very much so when it aligns with the CMDB. The next, of course, is you want to do the right thing. There may be a new initiative, there may be something that's already been done. And in that case, we recommend a 5-step approach, which is start, talk, walk, deliver, and close. And what that means, again, is start is really about getting all the people that are stakeholders aware of the initiative, because everybody has to be putting in the time and effort for moving the CMDB forward. The talk is really around talking to each one of them, understanding where they're coming from a functional process and from a technical standpoint. So you have the complete context over what it is that is going on within your organization. The walk is around looking at the documentation, process documentation, the implementation, the technical implementations, with ServiceNow, without ServiceNow integrations, all that stuff, to make sure as a part of the team that is responsible for a successful CMDB, we understand the technology underpinning all the efforts that are going on within the organization. And the delivery is really around making sure that all of this, the gamut of different information, is compiled into a recommendation that makes sense for what you need to do as the next step. So what's the right thing to do? And finally, the close is around, everybody you spoke to in the beginning, you need to share this vision, share the roadmap, share the approach, so that they know what is going on, they know what to expect, and more importantly, they know who within the team they can commit to make sure that the initiative has the support it needs from a resource standpoint and from an expertise standpoint. So that's really a couple of things. When you're looking at the CMDB, definitely something you have to think about. And of course, there's the process, right? So we spoke about the process. We can get into the details, right? So I can call it, it's called configuration planning and management, and I can call it configuration identification and all of those technical terms. But in reality, if you step back, it's 5 things, right? What's configuration management? It's the plan, the design, run, report, and audit, right? Think of it as, anything you did. You say you're going on a vacation, right? You plan the vacation, you design the logistics, you go on a vacation, right? You look at some photos and all the good things that you did in retrospect. You kind of make sure you're on budget, right? And you haven't gone overboard. These 5 steps, like you would apply to anything else, absolutely applies to the CMDB and are the core 5 phases of configuration management. So as you think about, like we mentioned before, as you think about the CMDB, definitely focus heavily on what the process brings in for you. And of course, the technology. So when it comes to the technology, we're going to spend a lot more time in terms of how it works with ServiceNow, how we recommend the configurations to be done with our product, and even the demo in terms of how you can really do some great discovery configuration so that your CMDB stays accurate.
Yeah, so as you can tell, there's an awful lot that goes into CMDB to make it successful. We've got this down to a science and an art, so we've certainly helped a number of customers get to that CMDB nirvana that's often been promised but rarely reached. So we want to talk a little bit about how does that help you beyond the ITSM world. So service management doesn't stop and end with IT. In fact, we're seeing that ServiceNow itself is branching out into areas far beyond IT, and service management concepts are useful across the entire enterprise. So one of the areas that we're seeing CMDB used quite a bit is for customer service management, and that is sort of like customer service, as in the typical help desk the customer calls with an issue and needs to log it. But it's actually much more than that. Customer service management is taking the service management lessons learned from ITIL and applying those to a customer service and customer experience environment. So when you have a fully populated and valid CMDB that you can then use to determine what customers are using what parts of your infrastructure, especially if you are a high-tech B2B organization, that becomes a very critical part of delivering that customer experience, not just being able to quickly isolate issues and knowing who's going to be impacted, but also to be proactive and preventative from issues happening to begin with. Likewise, with IT operations management and security operations, having self-healing vulnerability responses and security incident responses that are based off of runbooks driven by the CMDB is a huge step forward for both of those areas. And then business continuity, I have trouble understanding how organizations do disaster recovery and business continuity without having a CMDB, because if you don't know what business services you're offering and what technology is supporting them, it's very hard to create backup systems for those. So, this is an area where it's not just incident, problem, and change that are helped by having the CMDB. There's much wider areas of the enterprise that are benefited by having the promise of CMDB met. Okay. So, with that, let's talk about our next steps. We have part 2 of this series next week, next Thursday. So if you haven't done so already, we invite you to register for that. Today's session was intentionally focused primarily on the business case and the business uses around CMDB. The next session will be focused more on the technologies. So that'll be talking about ServiceNow and discovery admin specifically. So things that you'll see actually in place and see them in action as to how they can help you drive the CMDB. So please register for that. Likewise, if you would like a private consultation with us, we are more than happy to have a conversation about where you're at in your journey with CMDB. So please just shoot us an email and we can get that set up. And I think that takes us to our question and answer time. So for those who have stuck with us through the webinar, if you have questions, if you put them into the chat throughout the session, we'll address those. And if you have any that you'd like to have us ponder, please go ahead and put those into the chat section now.
All right, this is Scott. We have a couple of questions that have come through. James, I think I'll pass this first one to you, and maybe we'll pass the second one to Shiv. Do you recommend using multiple data sources for CMDB?
Yes, but not initially. Again, data sources are a technical solution, and one of the big challenges that I've seen organizations struggle with is having too much data to consume too quickly. I think I mentioned earlier the client that I have has 71 classes of CIs. That's far too many for you to be able to consume the process around. So I'm a much bigger fan of starting with a small number of CI classes, maybe 4 or 5, getting the process down, proving that you can do it, and then adding on from there. So when it comes to multiple data sources, absolutely a federated data source approach to CMDB is usually done in most organizations that are successful with it, but it's a second or third phase of a CMDB implementation.
Okay, thanks, James. Shiv, I'll direct this next one to you. I'll add a little bit of commentary to the question in the window too. So the question is, we have a very basic CMDB that was implemented when we first implemented ServiceNow and we know it needs to be improved, but don't know how or where to start. What do you recommend? My commentary is, one of the things that we're seeing a lot with our customers now is a great interest in other solutions and other applications like event management. And we're seeing a lot of sort of renewed interest around the configuration management database because they quickly learn that, if the CMDB, rich data is not there, it's very hard to do event management. So again, we're seeing a lot of customers that, in their phase one, they kind of implemented, what a lot of people call CMDB Lights, and basically, haven't touched it since then. And again, now they're really starting to feel the pain and see the need. So Shiv, I'll turn that one over to you. So again, the core question is we've kind of got CMDB Light. Where do we go from here?
Absolutely. So I'm going to, your CMDB Lights, first of all, let's make sure what parts of the CMDB you're using, right? Exactly what we alluded to before in the call. And then I'm going to piggyback on what James said, which is business services, right? So if you don't know where to start top down, right? Start with your business services, align as closely as possible with the consumers of your data. This adds a little more, there's more to why we want to start with business services. Of course, it makes sense, it aligns with your business, but what that does is it lets you have the conversations with the business leaders outside of IT and get their buy-in so that they start using the CMDB in their processes. And like we mentioned before, it's the use, it's the consumption, right? It's the data-driven portion of the CMDB that's actually going to give you the CMDB success. In terms of where to start or what to do, again, what was mentioned before, it's a CI class by CI class at a time. Which CI class do you start with? Well, start with the folks who are most excited about working with you, right? So what I mean by that is, yeah, you can say, okay, this is absolutely very important. We need the data. But if that team who's closest to the data has, for a very good reason, other priorities, it's not going to be as successful as maybe a smaller team that is really excited about getting onto the CMDB, leveraging their processes, and leveraging the data within the CMDB for their processes. So this is our initial recommendation for how you should approach or get started if you don't know exactly where to start.
All right, good. Thanks, Shiv. More questions in here. I know both of you guys are discovery experts. So James, I'll start with you, and Shiv, feel free to add on to James's answer. It says, typically, what percentage of attributes can you maintain through ServiceNow discovery?
What percentage of attributes can you maintain? That's an interesting question, and I'm going to have to give the standard consultant answer. It depends. It really depends on the class of CI. You're going to get more information from a Windows server than you are from a switch, obviously. So you can get quite a bit of information from most of the CIs, most of the attributes. And I would say that most of the stuff that you actually care about, you're going to get through ServiceNow's discovery. And if you're not getting a particular attribute, such as organizational information, there are ways to capture that as well. But from my experience, most of the things that are actually useful and transactional, you're going to get through discovery. So I can't give you a numerical answer as to what percentage, but I'm going to say that most of your needs are going to be met by the discovery tool being able to capture attributes for CIs. Shiv, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that when we do these recommendations, right, we flip things around, right? We come back with what discovery has to offer, right, and we intersect that with the requirements that the customer has. And very often, the customers want the data, but they're not really sure what they want or how they're going to use it. So our design recommendation is: here's the CI classes that ServiceNow Discovery discovers. You've already invested in that product, and here's the design, or here's what you're going to get with the minimal configuration, with the minimal maintenance requirement for those attributes. And then we align on the value. To James' point, if there's any manually maintained attributes, our product actually can download the rules. You have rules, right? If owned by, if it belongs to this class, this location, this guy's the owner, we can intelligently capture these rules and put them in the Discovery Admin app, and we can show that to you next week. And what that does is it allows you to not only have the discovered attributes, but also the manually maintained attributes, we can supplement your CMDB automatically with that. And what that does is it gets you to a automatically maintained CMDB with very little overhead. So hopefully that answers. But to James' point, yeah, there is really a percentage, but yes, the stuff that comes back from ServiceNow, that's very, very useful.
All right, great. Thanks, Shiv. Let's see. I guess I'll direct this one to, why don't we start with Shiv this time? We are using data from multiple sources: discovery, SM, integration, user entered, and other discovery sources such as Science Logic. The challenge we have is reconciling data because one we call Apple and the other one we call Green Apple.
All right. So this is a classic data normalization example. ServiceNow, going a little technical here, there is a out-of-box capability in ServiceNow called field normalization. And there is another very subtle but underused capability in discovery. It's a part of the phase 3 of discovery, which is called identifiers or identification. And you probably guessed what it is, but it really allows us to tell ServiceNow what attributes in the record make that record unique. So it's almost like, you go back to your traditional database design, it's the primary key, right? Or the attributes that comprise of the primary key. So that is the first thing that we need to figure out is how do we identify what a unique record is and we configure that in ServiceNow so ServiceNow understands that. But that is only a part of your problem. The second part is around pure data normalization. And when you talk about Apple and Green Apple in this example, right? We can have again, with the field normalization capability in ServiceNow, you can create these rules, and this is out of the box capability where you can call Apple and Green Apple, you can call it maybe APP, and that is your normalized field. And that is the field that you report on. And if data comes in from different sources with these different, different names for the same thing, ServiceNow and the rules that we define as a part of the field normalization in ServiceNow can output a consistent view. That is, of course, in ServiceNow. Very often we also see customers do some basic level of massaging, capitalization or something like that. So that's another option, but that comes in as a part of your ETL maybe or another process. But if it's in ServiceNow, it's field normalization and identifiers when it comes to ServiceNow discovery. Hopefully that sheds some more light.
All right, great. Thank you, Shiv. With that, I think we will go ahead and wrap up. If any additional questions come in before we close out the webinar, we will get responses out for that. Here's our contact information up on the screen. And with that, I want to thank everybody for your participation and for attending. And everybody have a great rest of your week and weekend. Take care.